Started. All right, great. So everybody, thanks for joining today. Another awesome webinar, our last one for the year. We're now the Regen-ag channel on Work on Climate is well over a year old, I think probably 15, 16 months. So, thanks for everyone for joining. First timers, it's awesome to see you. Again, post your name or whatever in the chat, where you're calling from, what you hope to learn, or any questions you may have. We will get to those later in the presentation or the webinar. But we'll just I'm not that interesting, but the person we have here today is. So it's really my pleasure to introduce Erik, because during COVID I was binge watching all these documentaries, and when I came across his and the Need to Grow, I was like, I got to meet this dude. And sure enough, I reached out and he's like, what does this guy want? And I'm like, well, I don't know yet, but I'd like to talk to you and see what you're doing and learn more, and like how I can help you personally if I can. And I had a chance to, when I was down in Southern California, where Erik's based, I had a chance to visit what he's doing at Alegria, and wow, I met him. He's an eccentric guy. He's awesome. I mean, but the most important, what spoke to me was when I tried the food. The produce blew my mind. I mean, when you talk about flavor, I've never had fennel that tasted like that. It just it was incredible. I just absolutely remember that. And eating lettuce raw, like who wants to do that without salad dressing? With his lettuce, you absolutely can. But no, Erik's an amazing guy, an incredible individual. And besides growing things, he likes long walks on the beach, wine, growing amazing cannabis, and just like all things agriculture. So we're going to dig into it, but Erik, it would be cool to hear from you. Like, how did you get started in agriculture, and how did you start on this regenerative path? And let's learn more about that, and then get into about Alegria and everything else.
Well, Josh, thanks so much, buddy. And I'm wildly impressed with you too. I didn't take you seriously at first, but after about an hour of you watching you just knock every, musical selection, I realized that guy's got a mind on him that doesn't quit. So I got into regenerative ag about probably 35 years ago without even knowing it. I was a biochemist, oncologist major. I was 6 years pre-med. I thought I knew a lot in 1981 when I graduated from Cal State Fullerton with a degree in biology, and I was going to go to med school. And then I just realized my mother had taught me that food was medicine. And it was really funny that she'd said that, and I didn't pay any attention way back then. I don't even think people were talking about it, but my mother had always fed us incredibly well. We had a big garden, and I realized that if I was going to get into medicine, I had to follow this protocol of drugs. And I said, well, drugs, I've had 4 years of organic chemistry and P-Chem that kicked my ass, and all the other chems. And I said, they don't really get recognized by the body. So why are people pushing this? And I realized way back then it was a big money game. And I said, well, it's not for me. So I became a serial entrepreneur. I owned a car company, did automotive design for 19 years. I published a magazine for 14 years. I built a project in French Polynesia, and I lost it because I realized that there's no such thing as a recovered alcoholic. They're just one scotch, Johnny Walker, from becoming an alcoholic. But what I learned about my travels all over the world, I was a professional photographer, was that everywhere I went, there was a big problem with food. We didn't have good food. I mean, you go to Bora Bora, you spend $2,000 a night on an overwater bungalow, and you eat crappy hamburgers from New Caledonia. And so I realized that there was an opportunity in that, but I really never jumped on it until I came back from a lot of travels. I was working in Mexico, publishing a magazine called Baja Life. And about 2008, the world caved in. So my job was actually working with developers around the world to make them more green, working with, green building, basically anything I could do to make them more environmentally friendly, and also attract an American audience that was starting to look at more environmentally friendly building techniques and places to go. But once again, even working in Mexico, there's a lot of good places with food there. Maybe some of you have been to Las Flores down in Cabo San Lucas. We were one of the marketing companies that actually told those guys, try it. I think the Americans will come to you. Now they're wildly successful. So it became food in 2008. I started thinking about it. I was 52 years old, and when the world basically went into foreclosure, my entire business selling Americans to go to French Polynesia or Mexico or Australia kind of fell apart. So I said, what do I want to do? And I thought, well, I think there's got to be something in food, but I'm not sure what. And about a month after I was thinking about that, my little brother's boy got a really horrible kidney disease. And I was traveling. I came back and he said, you got to see Aiden. Aiden's in the hospital. Here's an 8-year-old boy, beautiful little boy, all tubes down his throat. Kidneys are shut down. And I knew immediately what had caused it. My brother was not the same ilk as me, and it fed him way too much salt, oil, and sugar his entire life. I mean, he ate 100 hot dogs a week. And all of a sudden his kidneys were shutting down and the doctors were saying it's a double kidney transplant or this boy's gone. And boy, did I get pissed. I mean, that's the kindest word I can use. And my brother and I didn't talk for about a year because I blamed him for it. And I said, we've been talking about this. But after that episode, that was the trigger point for me. I realized I know how to avoid this, and it is food. And I'd always grown most of my own food anyway as a hobby. I had a tremendous background in organic chemistry. I was really experimenting with hydroponics because I thought, as a marketing advertising director at the time, I had my own marketing company. I love to tell stories. I said, what's the real story? Well, when Dixon Despommier came up with vertical farming, I thought, man, that's really cool. And it's got to be hydroponic and let's build billion-dollar buildings and do it that way. Well, it took me about 2 years to realize what a stupid idea that was, that we're not going to be building in billion-dollar buildings for a long time, if ever. And that if we go after hydroponics, we're basically cutting plants, right? I mean, basically it's like cutting a human in half and saying, go ahead and survive without your gut, because now we've taken out all the microbes and the soil out of the system and you're soilless. And that's when I decided, okay, what does high performance urban micro farming look like if we use soil? And what has to be in the soil so that I can take soil out of the equation for most people, because it's so complex and so difficult to build good soil. What does, who can I partner with to actually get a very good, reliable supply of regenerative organic soil? And it turned out I had a friend called Kathy Kellogg at Kellogg Garden Products, and I pitched her and she said, oh yeah, sure, we can help you out, but you got to buy you got to buy a ton. I said, how about a couple 50-yard loads? And so they agreed to give me a couple 50 cubic yard loads to play with. And about a half a year after I got those, I didn't expect it to show up, but when Kathy says, let's go, she goes. I mean, next day a sliding truck shows up and drops 50 yards on my farm. And I said, whoa, hold on. We started adding some of the things that were not in soil commonly at that time. A lot of the rock phosphates, a lot of the volcanic dusts. We were starting to really look at the microbial side. What types of manures or chicken poops or whatever, fish hydrolysates, et cetera, what would light this thing up and make a soil that would be much more potent and allow the average grower to grow food, and be very successful at it. Because, let's face it, back 12 years ago, very few people thought about growing their own food. I guess today, when 1940s and 50s, it was about 40 to 50% of this country grew food. Now 0.1% grow food. And of course, we all have no time. It's too much work, et cetera, et cetera. So I knew I had to make a really simple system, and soil had to be almost taken out of the equation. You just had to buy soil, be able to put a plant in it, and yippee-ki-yay, it grew great. So after about a year of playing and doing about 30 or 40 different trials on our farm, I mean, I was trialing everything in different combinations and all. I sent it back over to Kellogg because I was starting to get some pretty darn good results. And a month after they tested it against all of their best blends, they called me and they said, hey, Erik, are you seeing what we're seeing? I said, yeah, I am. I said, what are you seeing? They said, well, you're 263%, yield above our best soil right now. What are you doing? And I said, well, I'm playing with it. I said, so how'd you like to see 500% more? Because I think I have an idea. And they said, well, show me. So another month later, we Added a few more goodies to it. It tested out at 580% more yield than their best soil. And that intrigued me because I've always been a kind of guy, I'm a serial entrepreneur, and I always love pushing things to their limit. I mean, to me, it's really fun to see, how can you optimize something, whether it's a race engine, whether it's a run over a hill, or the performance of soil. And I got really turned on it with this. So the next few years, I started looking at micronizing minerals and looking at the fractal nature of soil, which means I started looking at all of us as beings of light. And it really didn't dawn on me until about a year ago that light was probably the key that connected everything. And I mean, that's pretty damn obvious, isn't it? I mean, we all know that we are like a plasma light show inside. Our mitochondria are kicking off 100,000 photons. Well, actually, every cell is 100,000 photons a second. So technically, we run on light. Well, if humans run on light, then why doesn't soil run on light? And I thought, how do I make minerals more fractal in nature? In other words, how can I put more photons in the soil? And what else would be needed? Well, oxygen. A lot of people don't understand why compacted soil doesn't work well. It's because, it's choking. So oxygen was a massive one. Organic matter was huge. We were working with soils in our fields locally that were less than 1%, didn't perform, but the new soils I was blending were up around 19-20%. And it was less like rocket fuel. And then what was the combination of minerals? What is the ratio of minerals? For example, is the best ratio of calcium to magnesium, 2-to-1, 5-to-1, 7-to-1? And I went back to the old masters, Albrecht and Anderson, those guys, and said, oh shit, they already figured it all out. I should just have read these books a little earlier. And I started blending soils with proper mineral ratios, super high microbial content, really good tilth. In other words, they had good soil structure, had high oxygen, a massive CEC, which is called, it's a cation exchange capacity, which means how much of the cations can the soil actually exchange at. And most soils were, it's a technical number, but they're down around 1.6. Mine were running around 9.5. And everybody freaked out and said, well, you've got too many minerals in your soils. And I said, no. You guys are missing the point here. The plant knows what to do. Fill the gas tank fully and just back off, watch the plant. So that's when I really learned that you feed soil, you don't feed plants. And at that point, things started really cooking. And that was about 3 or 4 years ago. So about 2017, I had 5.5 acres that we were operating. One acre I had 80,000 plants on a single acre, which a normal field has around 26,000 if you're farming organic or conventional. So I had almost 4 times that number of plants on my acre, and that was all regenerative. And I had 5 acres around me that I managed for the food bank that were all conventional. So I got the opportunity to see firsthand exactly how bad pesticides, herbicides, everything that got sprayed on a conventional field, what it did to plants, how it destroyed soil and everything else, because I literally was next door to it. I could take 10 steps from my perfectly non-sprayed soil farm onto a conventional field that had just got hammered. And I watched these plants get weaker and weaker. I watched the organic matter go down. And it was basically following all the principles that we knew 50 years ago, that, you destroy the microbial conditions of the soil and the plants can't defend themselves. So I said, wow, that sounds like human gut. As the biodiversity in your gut decreases, so does your resiliency. And that's when a bunch more lights fired up. I said, so how many species of bacteria do we share with soil in our own gut? Well, it turns out quite a few. And from that point on, I just decided that we have to build farms that are above ground. They can be, now that I had the soil, I had a SOX system. So we have it's called SOX box. We take our powered up Alegria soils and we fill it into a kind of a sausage-like sock. It's a garden socks from a company called Filtrex. And we do them in mass and we put them in a tray up in the air. And what we've actually developed by accident is a 100% regenerative organic growing system above ground, over cement, mobile, scalable, zero waste, and also takes advantage of hydroponics and aeroponics. And it's just become this super simple little system that I believe is, I say in a couple of videos, it's a solution that no longer can be ignored. It's too damn simple. And it's all because the soil is so powered up and it works in this tray. So that's a long-winded answer how I got into it, but it probably provides a little background on some of the reasons and why and how I got to different spots.
So maybe food as medicine resonates with you, which my next question would be like Alegria Pharmacy, and obviously not spelled PH, it's with farm, because you're growing the healthiest, most nutrient dense foods out there through the soils that you've done. I think actually, Will, if you wouldn't mind going back to that arugula pick in a socks box, but can you tell how like the Alegria Pharmacy came about, how this idea in like urban agriculture, and how like literally anybody could do this, or communities can like participate or join in and grow
sure
healthy food?
Any of you that have seen the movie The Need to Grow, I mean, I looked at myself in that movie. That was we finished it in 2017, and I saw myself kind of whining and crying about losing my farm, and I was very upset that I'd spent $500,000 in 5 years, and I just was getting profitable on a 1 acre urban micro farm, which was my goal. And then the city of Irvine decided to accept $50 million from a local philanthropist here and build ice skating rinks. And I said, well, that's a great idea. Let's knock the farm out and we'll freeze water. That's really effective. And so I actually, you mentioned I was a cannabis grower. I went home, I got super stoned, and I got super drunk that night. And I said, that's it, I'm done. I can't stand this place. Nobody cares. And I really felt sorry for myself for about a day, until my good buddy came over for dinner the next night. He goes, Eric, you're such a wimp right now. He goes, I don't see you do this shit. I mean, come on, get your big boy pants on. He says, you just built the wrong kind of farm. And I said, what do you mean? And he says, well, you need to have a mobile farm that can actually roll. It needs to be able to move. It needs to be, so if you're in the path of development, you roll your farm, and it should be over cement. And so I didn't think much of it that night because I was too happy. But the next morning I woke up really early, but way before the sun, and said, man, he struck a nerve. And so I decided that if we're going to change this conversation, then we have to build a food production system, not just a box, but an absolute fully carbon negative, zero waste, regenerative organic system that anybody could deploy. And so we embarked for the next half a year on what does that look like in a Mediterranean climate like we have here, and what does it look like in snow country like we just bought up in Montana. And we're under 8 inches of snow right now, and I'm happy to say that I've got 3,000 feet running at 71 degrees in the middle of a snowstorm. And I am growing arugula on Helena Flats Road. And I can't even drive down it right now. So that's pretty cool. So the idea is that a fully, how would you say, taking into account full circle carbon management is really the key. If we're going to become climate mitigators, we have to understand the true cost of carbon at every step. And basically, you think of a Tesla as we should have all electric cars. Well, of course, the carbon cost of batteries is about a 10-year hit on our climate. So it takes 10 years to offset that carbon cost. So how do we develop carbon negative or even carbon neutral food production systems when agriculture's got the biggest, baddest rap, because agriculture is the one that's causing all the climate change, according to everybody? I designed a greenhouse that basically functioned with our Soxbox system. It is all alternative energy. So we are using solar power to power it up. We are using dehumidifiers and other machines, if you will, that harvest water from air. We actually can now put an Alegria Pharmacy anywhere in the world, and it can be a carbon negative structure. So if you go to Alegria Pharmacy, and that's ALEGRIAFARMACY.com, you'll see some of the early renderings and the early drawings. We're actually far advanced from that right now. we're looking at a whole bunch of different systems that we can tack on that would make mobile, scalable, carbon negative food production possible. And it's all in regenerative organic soil that Alegria makes. So it basically, it's like an oasis of the cleanest healing food you could ever have. And we are, long story short, but I'll make it really short. This one, we tried to deploy those down here in Orange County, but it's $2 million an acre. And it just was not possible. And the politics down here is so disgusting that, we're such environmental freaks in California, but shoot, no one's going to back this unless there's, a 3,000% IRR attached to it. And so I finally gave up and said, screw it. I'm going to find some less expensive land. I didn't plan on buying land in Montana 4 months ago, but we did back into the mailbox of the property across the street, which happened to have two 5,000 square foot buildings and everything we needed to build a superfood processing plant. They told me they were selling it. Don't worry about the mailbox. I walked it for a half an hour and I put an offer on it that same day and I got it. So we closed on a $1.3 million facility, and tomorrow we close on a $1.9 million 77 acre farm, which is absolutely makes me giddy to think about it, because now I have a base of operations in one of the finest places in the world to showcase the full circle Alegria Pharmacy.
Awesome. Even though it's remote, I can't wait to visit. But you mentioned carbon a few times, and with the carbon in soils gets all the attention. But what about carbon in plants, and what have you learned and realized what the plant needs to be for nutrient availability for all this? Because that's getting all the rap right now.
Yeah, well, everybody thinks that nature is really concerned about putting carbon in soil. It's not really the way it works. Nature doesn't think that way. Nature actually puts carbon in plant tissues, and humans are supposed to eat those optimized plant tissues. So I started thinking about it a couple of years ago, and I said, if we're going to really make soil sexy, we have to change what we're doing, because really, who cares a lot about sequestering carbon in soil, which, by the way, is a very complex thing anyway, and sounds cool, but nobody really can explain it. And if you're going to get mass appeal on that, it really has to be directly attributed to something that helps humans. I mean, we're very selfish creatures. If we're going to buy something, we want benefit. And so I said, well, how does nature really work? Well, really, nature works. Yes, we do sequester carbon in soil to feed microbes, no question about that. But we also are sequestering carbon dioxide into plants. So the bottom line is, if you understand that all the plants on the planet right now are running at about 20% of the efficiency that they could, because of a degraded environment, because the soil is degraded. In other words, plants are only storing 20% of their potential carbon load. The greatest carbon sink is not soil, not even the ocean. It's the plant tissues themselves. So if we started, changing up this conversation and saying, listen, eat high carbon plants, which means you're eating light filled plants, which means you're eating healing plants. What does it take to get those plants? Where's the access to those? Well, you get those kind of plants if you grow them in very rich, organically and microbially and minerally soils. But the real key is, I think, and we should all start looking at, how can we reconnect this carbon talk to plants? And by the way, those plants that are loaded with, their entire optimized load of carbon are the ones you want to eat. Imagine if you've got all these diseases, because everybody does now. I don't. I mean, I wish I'd get sick. I don't even know what getting sick is anymore. It's 25 years since I had a cold. I had 9 farmers on my farm that, we hug each other through the pandemic the last year and a half. No masks, and none of us got sick. 3 of the spouses got really sick. So we were exposed a whole bunch of times. But strangely enough, not one of my 9 farmers nor me ever got sick. So I do attribute that to food. And I won't get political on that one or anything right now, but I have proven that you can beat the hell out of a virus with food, if you know what antiviral foods are. So going back to this, I eat plants that are highly optimized in carbon because I've tested them, and my plants have been tested several times now. They average On dry weight, they average over 40% more nutrient density than anything a couple of the boys at Metagenics have ever tested, and over 125% more phytoactivity. And that is a dehydrated sample. If I would have set them wet samples and they would have tested the wet samples immediately, they said you could double those numbers. So that means my food is 80% more nutrient dense than anything they've ever tested and 250% more phytoactive. And what that says to me is I got living food. I got grandma food. I'm eating food like our grandparents ate, which is exactly why our grandparents have lived so long and they're not getting sick, generally. So it's possible. And the whole key is the new conversation should be is how do we get more carbon in the tissues of plants? And then how do I eat those plants immediately after harvest? Because I want all that light energy and I want all that carbon.
No, awesome. No, thanks for that. And I think it's so important to understand what's going on above ground as well in the plants. I don't think we spend enough time and we just buy produce wherever we can. And if it's even going to be better, of course, if folks even go to the local farmers market, ask them about how their practices are, et cetera, that's probably going to be much better than going to most grocery stores and those types of things. So yeah, that's super important. So yeah, you've done one documentary, you have a new one coming out. You want to talk just a bit about Pharmacy of Light, and then we can then jump into some Q&A, and I also think the audience would love to know a bit more about the Montana farm coming up. So it would be cool if you could share some or share some thoughts on that.
So the Pharmacy of Light, you probably get, I do love to push the envelope, and I do love to bring new ideas to light. I like to make people think. About 40 years ago, and a guy named Dr. Pop, came up with the idea that basically food is the transportation system for light, and light in the food is what creates order. And you'll hear him say it in German. I laugh every time. It's got to create order. And what he means is that light-filled food gets into your system and actually manages everything, your metabolism, your endocrine, everything. Your entire system runs on light. The problem is we don't have that light in our food anymore, or that quantity of light, which means we're short-circuiting everywhere. Then you add in all the 8,000 pesticides, herbicides, fungicides we add to our food system every year in this country, which many are outlawed in Europe, but we just say no problem. Let's keep the American experiment going. And you add pesticides in there, you add stress, you add pollution, you add bad water. I mean, speaking of water, if you've got chlorine in your water, you're basically sterilizing your gut as often as possible. And we're starting to see that our gut, diversity is around 12,000 cultures compared to a healthy gut, which is anywhere from 30 to 40,000. Diverse organisms in there. And you'll find some of the healthiest, most resilient guts in the ghettos of Morocco, if you could believe it. Basically, if those kids don't die from all the disease they're exposed to, they've got the best resilience in the world. And in some African countries where they're not, where they're eating a very diverse diet of all kinds of things, they're not washing their food, they're not close contact to chlorinated products or fluorinated products. And so it's really a movie about light, and realizing that if you don't eat super hyper local fresh food, you're not getting your light load.
No, awesome. And I can't wait. And there's, you guys, we'll post a link, and you guys can see the trailer for that, which is coming out next year. So yeah, like really now that you've got this Montana place going, and talking about the transition, maybe that farm was conventional, or I don't know if it was organic, but can you then just quickly talk about that transition that you're going to do for the farm in Montana that you guys have acquired? And then after that, we'll open it up to some Q&A with from the audience.
Yeah, so it's really cool to be a high performance urban micro farmer, and we've pretty much got that down. And we've got the Sox box system on wheels in parking lots that really is doing a great job. We have a really great relationship with Second Harvest Food Bank. We've turned them into a farm bank We're actually delivering about 800 heads of lettuce a week now to marginalized people. We harvest the lettuce grown in our socks, which is the finest lettuce in the world. At 6 in the morning, it gets packaged by 7. It goes on a truck by 8. It's in the food bank pantries and the rescue kitchens by 9:30 in the morning. And so within 4 hours or less, these marginalized communities are getting the best food in the world, which, if you understand romaine lettuce that still is bleeding white milk, which is where all the phytochemicals and the brain chemistry is located, if you can eat that lettuce within 4 or 5 hours, guess what? You're really helping out your mind. And so I do believe that food is the great convener. It is also has a lot of social implications where if you're eating healthy food, you feel better, your body works better, you don't get as depressed, you don't get as stressed, you don't reach for a gun as often. And now I'm up in Montana where everybody has a gun, and it's interesting, nobody uses them unless you're going out and getting some meat. So you don't hear of people shooting each other up in Montana very often because it's a very healthy, wide open, free society up there. And I mean, I'm on the reddest street you could imagine. I drive by MAGA every day. And of course, I think he's the worst human being on the planet. I don't know what anybody else thinks, but I just think he's not very good. However, nobody up there cares. You know what they care about? They care about helping each other. So I've known that for 45 years. That was the first time I stepped into Glacier National Park. These people are amazing. I have the best water in the world. I have the best air. I have the best views. I have some of the finest land that's still very rich, even though it has been sprayed with some pesticides if it's in wheat. But that's actually why I bought this place. It was on a scale of 1 to 10, it was about an 8. It really needed some more organic matter, which was classic Montana land, which there's billions of acres. And so I thought, if I can take my soil elixir, if you will, and fix 77 acres, I probably have $100 million company minimum started, because there's going to be millions of acres in Montana alone that need to be healed. And I can show Montana farmers how to get out of these commodity crops. I'm also decently connected to John Tester and Baines, the 2 senators in Montana. So I actually think we're going to have Tester out on our farm here going, go, 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 because he's a big time rancher. He's a huge dude. I mean, he's big in every way. And so the idea about getting into Montana was, I love the freedom, I love the people, and I love the opportunity to take what I've learned here in soil and actually go up there and heal it on a much larger scale. And there was, interestingly enough, last week an MIT report that came out and said, Montana technically could be the next Amazon rainforest because of its carbon sequestration capacity in plants, because there's so much ag land up there. I mean, we live here in Orange County, where our density is 30,000 people per square mile. Up in Montana, it's 7. And I can go 10 miles up the road into Glacier and it's 1. And then I can go 50 miles south into the Great Bear and shoot, it's probably 1 every 5 miles. There's more bears than people. So you get the idea that there's a lot of land up there that has been misused, and the potential for me to take my solution to start healing that land and creating more organic matter that can pull carbon down in and put it into those plants is it's an incredible opportunity for us. So we actually are buying the 77 acres to do just that. I found conscious money that's not going to develop it. We're not putting any more homes on it. In fact, our motto is grow food, not homes. And I found that I'm tapped into some really, really great family offices of people that are ungodly wealthy that are saying, my kids, and there are a lot of them have young kids, my kids, we've got to do this right now. We got to spend money doing this. And so I'm actually able to put some very conscious capital to work, which is, God, it's one of the funnest things I've ever done.
No, amazing. So you already addressed my next question on scale, because when we talk about regen ag, like, we're always thinking, how do we get this to scale? So this is awesome that, hey, 77 acres is a freaking great start in Montana. Hopefully your neighbors will be looking over your fence post and seeing, or no fence post ideally, right? And
there are no fence posts, and they're
exactly.
all, I've already hired both neighbors on both sides. They're working with me.
So I think then that actually we're going to start Q&A, but Stanley asked this question, which is kind of tangential to this. Like, what are the possible threats to your farm remaining clean, right? I mean, there's drift, there's things like that. I guess it's of course encouraging your neighbors to change, but yeah, what are your thoughts? And then Arjun, it'd be great if you could just unmute yourself afterwards and ask your question. So go for it.
That's a super question because, you know, I'm a Californian and still have a California plate on my rig, and boy, it's hard to get the attention. So my strategy, I came in about 4 months ago. I started feeding everybody the best food. They never tasted food like this. And I built this big, beautiful kitchen, and I've invited everybody over like once a week, you know, all my neighbors, and they all, you know, looked at me with a jaundiced eye at first and said, who is this guy? What's he doing? They don't trust him. Let's say, well, we'll go over and eat with him. What the hell? He's serving good wine and good food. And pretty soon they started bringing some of their beef that was raised by their cattle on their farm, the wild elk that they shot, the chickens they're harvesting. All of a sudden, I'm looking at not only vegetables that I'm growing on site, but some of the finest, cleanest meat in the world. And I started finally, after about a month or two, I breached the subject. I said, guys, you know, we got a lot of problems with land around here and we need to heal it. What do you guys think? And they said, yeah. We don't know how bad it is. Do you know? And boy, I said, oh, yes, I do know. And I can. So I said, you want to see what you're spraying on your stuff here? And I showed them, and I sort of studied it up, and I gave them a simple overview that you're pretty much killing yourself. You want cancer, this is exactly how you're going to get it. And you're sitting on some of the best land in the world. And so I did get a very heavy buy-in right away. And I'm seeing that these people, it's really a lack of education. They don't know how bad this stuff is for their land, and they don't want to hurt their land. I mean, none of these guys want to damage their land. I mean, most of these people are on their land for 50 years. The land I'm buying right now, they've been on it for almost 60. They're 84 years old. And the only reason they sold it to me is because, you know, the old man got Parkinson's and he's 84. Well, drinking out of some lead pipes for 50 years and finally got Parkinson's. You know, that's how they built houses back then. My point is that I do feel that the timing is really right. And that, I mean, Montana is an interesting place because it's incredibly cliquey, but it's also very open-minded. I mean, you think you think about red states being closed in, they're not. These are ultra capable, ultra healthy people in general, and they go out of their way to help everybody. So once they like you, and I've now become their liked neighbor, and I can start throwing out some pretty difficult concepts, I'm watching people go, you know, how can you, I've got a lady down the street said, how can you fix my 350 acres? I said, just give me let's get out from under snow and I'll throw some of my soil on it. Now, in order to do this on a carbon negative basis, I have to have local supply of all my stuff. Well, guess what? We have lumber mills with hundreds of them all over Montana that have the most incredible 6.5 pH bark fines that have been sitting there for 40 years in landfills that make the best compost on the planet. Then we also have Flathead Lake 20 miles away that they're getting rid of the Mackinaw, which are 30-pound, 40-pound fish because they're predatory. They're killing everything else in the lake. And guess what they're making? They're making fish hydrolysate on the res. And so I have an amazing source of fish hydrolysate, bark fines. Oh, let's go down to Anaconda and Butte. Well, there's the mine that's got all the montmorillonites, all the phosphates, all the minerals. Within 30 miles of me, I have everything I need to make the best soil elixirs on the planet. And so my goal is to start showing people how we can put an inch of my compost over the top of their damaged field, and in 2 to 3 months, increase the organic matter 3 to 4%, which that's just a very lofty goal. Might only get 2, but I think we can really jam it because I'm going to put a lot of fish hydrolysate on there, and it's almost free because it's waste. So
Yeah.
my business is based on waste to energy, and I've sourced all the waste products all over Montana for the last 10 years, and now it's time to roll it out.
No, that's
Stay tuned.
awesome and good to hear. So thanks for that answer. It helps to explain, and like Montana can become a super powerhouse with you know, growing some of the most nutritious food. Arjun, I think you had your hand up, so if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself, that'd be great.
Can you hear me? Can you hear
Yep.
me well?
Mhm.
Okay. Wow, Eric, this has been the most fascinating discussion, and filled with hope, because, you know, usually when you come to these things, I mean, I've never heard anything this this amazing. So anyway, thanks for that, because it's really sort of uplifted me. I wanted to ask, so is that the solution then that you see in terms of transitioning from the sock box to sort of a much larger land scale based solution? Is it just the elixir that you see as the way forward? I mean, for example, if someone were to have, say, a large amount of land, what would you advise that they do in, from your learnings from Sockbox, or is it something different that you need to sort of appropriate and that you're going to be testing out right now once you've acquired these 77 acres? I'm just curious about
Well, it's a great question. It's a detailed one, but I'll try to answer it really simply. First of all, you need to have a baseline. You need to test the soil. You need to see what's in it. I mean, some of the things I look for immediately are, what are the NPK values, the big minerals? What are the trace look like? I mean, there's a whole bunch of little traces like boron and manganese and zinc and copper and those things that you want to have in certain concentrations. So you test the soil for minerals, and then you take a look at the organic matter. And at that point, you kind of have an idea, which direction you need to go. The trick is how, depending on where this piece of land is, you can't really transport carbon by burning carbon. In other words, you can't put 100 pounds of soil on a truck and put 20 gallons of gas in the truck and say you're doing something good for the climate. So you really have to be kind of creative, like we were. We said, when we got up in the valley there, we said, so where are the sources of nitrogen? Where are the sources of potassium? Where are the sources, where's a boron source? Where is a good, bark fine source? And so we had to go around and really dig to find all these natural, elements in soil in order to say we can build it locally. And I think, for example, if you're in India, or if you're in, out way outside the city, you're going to have to source local goods, and you have to get them really cheap. The idea that we're Bill Gates and we're going to put $1 billion and give somebody $1 billion and build something out there one time is stupid. You've got to teach people to fish. You can't give them a fish. So the answer is it's not an easy one. It's what resources are available. The testing of the land is easy. I mean, we can send it up to, the soil food web, Elaine Ingram's place, and get a really great idea what's going on. We have a couple labs. We can evaluate them very quickly. We're going to build our own soil testing lab, so that I don't have to wait for anybody else to tell me. And then we can say, okay, what resources are available to start amending that soil? And I think that's the way you approach it. Now, if you do it that way, I mean, the change is monumental. I mean, it happens very quickly. Soil can heal quickly. Everybody says, oh, it takes years. Man, it actually only takes months if you do it right. And that's great news. But it's an attitude thing, and it's a political thing. We've got to get people to say, listen, we got to stop killing the soil because we think we're getting more yield. Now you're going up against big food, big fertilizer, right? Which they're a powerful lobby. You're going up against Dow, Syngenta, Monsanto, you name it. They don't want you to stop using their chemicals. So you've got to change people's mindset. And the only way I think I can do that, I'm going to practice something here. I'm going to invite you guys all up to my farm, but I'm going to grow specialty crops. I'm going to take the 77 acres. I'm going to amend it. And then I'm going to grow the highest value crops in the world. I'm going to show these guys how I can make 18,000 an acre, not 500 an acre growing winter wheat being sprayed. Yeah. And that's it. It's money. Bottom line.
No, great answer. The whole thing is, well, besides visiting Erik, number one, finding those local sources, and they exist. I mean, if you've listened to like Dan Kitchen, these folks, getting the rock
totally exist,
and all these things all around the country, whether you're in the Southeast and there's, unfortunately they're cutting down trees. There's a ton of sources from bark there and carbon there. And you just need to create the right mix. So, there exists. But Richard, I miss hearing your voice. Why don't you unmute yourself, say hi from Vancouver, and ask your neighbor to the east your questions if you're there.
Hey, awesome, Erik. This is inspiring, man. What you've just made happen just by getting out there and doing it. This is so cool.
Thank you. That's my favorite logo, is the swoosh. It's just do it. Stop talking.
Getting out there.
Even though I talk a lot.
Yeah. Right. It's good talk. Well,
I'm usually talking while I'm walking, though.
So in Montana, what's your plan? What's the most light dense foods that you're going to be growing across different seasons? And for the consumer who wants to get good food into our kids' bodies and don't live in Montana next to you, what should we be sourcing, buying? What are the foods that are awesome? That hold the light the best?
Well, that's a tricky question too.
Yeah.
Foods don't hold the light the best. All foods oxidize the second they're harvested. It's just like we're perfect when we come out of the womb, right? And we take our first breath of air and we start dying. However, we got to breathe air in order to live too. So oxidation is rampant. I would say the easiest way to answer that question generically is to say, eat the rainbow. I mean, all of the greatest antioxidants are powerful colors. I mean, the anthocyanins are in the reds and purples. The beta carotenes are in the yellows. You've got all your chlorophylls in the greens. So I would look for the freshest food you can find. And the way I would start doing it is, if people don't start using their dollars to support local farmers, they're making a massive mistake. I mean, seek out, this movement's got some momentum. I mean, there's millions of local farmers coming up from across the United States. Many of them are women, and many of them are women of color, because they know they got kids. If they don't feed their kids the right food, these kids are going to be, poisoned. They're going to be autistic. They're going to be sugared out. They're going to be oiled out. I mean, these kids are going to be in deep trouble. And so there are farms everywhere. I suggest that we all start saying, okay, if I'm really into this, spend the extra time, Google local organic farms, go find these farms. So ask the farmer how he grows his food, see what they're growing and why. Now, I mean, the brassica families with all the broccolis, the cauliflowers, that's a great family. The kales, super foods. I'm growing a lot of the adaptogens. I grow turmeric, ashwagandha, tulsi basil, ginger. I mean, I'm growing some of the highest power, Ayurvedic herbs I possibly can. So it really, it boils down to two things. What do people like to eat in the area? And then what would be the most powerful foods that you could provide them so that they could use that to make those recipes? And that's kind of what we're going to do we have an Alegria World Kitchen. I'm a fairly accomplished chef, and I'm surrounded with a lot of accomplished ones. And since I'm a farmer chef and kind of a plant doctor, I have no excuse but to show people exactly what to put on a plate to cure IBS, for example. Or I make a tea that I swear COVID can't live anywhere near.
Yeah, that tea is incredible. Almost as good as your salsa. Almost as good as your salsa.
Almost. But, well, I mean, I've taken people with badass COVID symptoms, and 4 hours later, they're almost gone. I'm not joking. And it's just, this stuff's powerful, but there's like 25 things in it.
Yeah. So
if you go to our Instagram site, we're at Alegria Farms, Alegia Farms, FARMS, on IG, and look at that. Look back a few posts. You'll see people kept asking me, okay, Mr. Cutter, you tell me you can take out COVID with food. What do you got to eat? So I said, try this tea. And I've had so many people get back to me that actually did it. They said, wow, that shit works. And God, it makes me feel so good. I go, well, you think?
So Kevin, that's your assignment, right? Kevin Silverman, your assignment to go find that recipe and post it to the chat, please. Cause I don't remember how to get into my Instagram account.
So I will, if somebody wants to email me, I will give you the detail on it. I'll give you the full Monty Alegria tea, and I'll show you what I put in it. But I have access, I grow over 250 things to eat. So I put everything in there, from edible flowers to, black pepper, fresh ginger, fresh, you name it. I put it in there.
Yeah, awesome.
So I'll give you the full recipe, and then any combination thereof. And everybody look up adaptogenic herbs. It's Ayurvedic medicine. I believe in it like no tomorrow. And I also believe in Chinese herbalism. I study it. I practice it. We grow a lot of the Chinese herbs. We grow a lot of the Indian herbs. And if you start looking at some of the most, Google the top 5 or top 8 Ayurvedic herbs on the planet, man, grow them, eat them. because we don't know how they work, because they're called adaptogens because they get in your body and they fix stuff. And it's very complex pathways, but your metabolism will increase immediately. You'll feel better. So I hope that answers your question, because it's a hard one.
Yeah, and just real quick, because he's up near you, like growing season, how you're deciding on what to plant, and in the climate of Montana, if you could just touch on that, and then I think Catherine might be volunteering to help out. So we want to hear from Catherine in a sec.
Awesome. Well, so I'm stubborn, and I grow all this great stuff down here in this Mediterranean climate. And now that I have a greenhouse that works, we took over an old greenhouse and I got it cranking. And so I'm going to grow everything I want up there, anything I want. I'm 71 degrees, it's 20 degrees outside. So I'm going to grow everything I grow down here in Alegria in a Mediterranean climate in a hoop house right now. We'll be putting in a really beautiful, full-blown 5,000 square foot polycarbonate greenhouse that you can see through. And we'll be building a restaurant next to that, so that when people come to eat, it's a private restaurant. It's called No Reservations. It's actually called Mabel's Table, the name of our cow. And we're going to only invite people that are really cool, that really love food, and only want to come and eat when we're eating. So I think we'll fill the place. And they'll be able to see out the restaurant and see where their food's coming from. They'll watch it get harvested. So these are the kind of things I'm going to try to show people that we've got to get back to, and that they can make a ton of money.
Awesome. Catherine, did you want to just, I saw you post a question, but maybe about how people can help, or like what you'll need to scale, like on an acreage or per farm basis? You want to share your thoughts there with Erik?
Sure. Erik, thank you so much. Just really inspiring. And Josh, thank you for organizing this. A couple of, I think, hopefully very quick questions, because I know we're coming to the end of the hour. One is, when you're running full steam up there, how many workers do you think you'll need? How skilled do they have to be to begin with? And number two is, I'm sure you use a lot of your own seeds over time, but do you have a good source of clean, healthy seeds that you use for new things? Thank you.
Okay, first question. Well, my pleasure, and thank you for asking. Yes, we'll probably be running a team of about 20 to 30. Yes, we are hiring. Yes, we are looking for conscious money investors. Yes, I've got about 10 business units I'm designing up there. We're actually putting in a bakery. We're putting in freeze dryers. We're going to have a superfood freeze drying facility. We're going to develop our own line of super stabilized berry-based freeze-dried food. Of course, one of my friends loves distilling gin, and he goes, "Well, I want some of that concentrated in my gin." I go, "Well, then come on up and put a still in too, of course." And so the bottom line is, I'm building a foodie's haven. And we're going to build a urban ag training institute, which will be, I'm going to build some beautiful shipping container housing, which actually is almost as nice as my house here in Laguna. I'm going to go check them out in Las Vegas tomorrow. But we're going to have, tiny homes built out of, steel containers that you would never know they were a container. And they'll be all off grid, solar powered. You'll be drinking the water I'm drinking. And we'll have places for people to stay and learn. And then I'm going to start bringing in other types of people, such as, we'll have the traditional eco resort modalities, such as, meditation and yoga, and of course, fly fishing, which I'm an insane fly fisherman that doesn't get to fish much. And I have the best water at the other end of my property. I know where there's a huge fish that's broke me off 3 times, and he's going to get it. So anyway, yes, come on up. We're going to be able to train you. We'll be able to put you in. You can volunteer. So I would say that wouldn't happen for probably 2 months or so, because I've got to get a little bit more facility for people to stay on site. But, I'll share my email with you, and you can tell me when you can come up, or you can come up anytime and see it. And we can start talking about what you want to do. My idea is to train people to do this and take it away with them. I'm open source. I'm not patenting anything.
Amazing. So, I mean, we're at the hour. I mean, hopefully everybody's enjoyed this. I mean, I think it was super informative. I posted Erik's email at the top. earlier in this. I'll post it again for those of you who don't have to scroll back in the chat. And thank you, Richard, for posting, finding that compost tea. I don't even know how to get onto Instagram anymore, so I appreciate that.
It's Instagram.com/whatever.
For you guys, let's give Erik a big round of applause. Maybe he'll stick around for one or two more questions after we hit the.
Of course I will. Of course I will.
That's the end button to the recording. But yeah, thanks again, man. It means a lot. It's great to see you. I'm so excited for Montana. And yeah, so you guys stick around maybe one or two. You know, I think Erik's enjoying a Malbec probably right now. So I think I might crack something open.
Definitely.
But yeah, let's stick around and ask him another question. And yeah, thank you for everybody for participating. And I'm going to share this video to the Work on Climate. It'll also be on YouTube. So yeah, so hopefully there's legs and people can see this. So thanks again, Erik. And with that, we're going to stop the recording.